Crypto goes to Washington. Uniswap tells the SEC to take a lap. And sadly, the movie Her will not become a reality anytime soon. All that and more coming up on Block and Order. Welcome to Block and Order, the show that explores the legal issues facing the world of Web3 and beyond. I'm Kyle Lawrence, and with me, as always, he's the man your parents warned you about when you wouldn't eat your vegetables, Moish Peltz. Moish, you look very
Hey
different
Kyle,
tonight. I don't
welcome
even know
back.
who you are.
Better eat your broccoli, kids. Do not adjust your television screens. Something has changed.
Right.
Drop a comment if you can tell what it
Whoever
is.
wins the grand prize.
That's right.
Well, Moish, lot of goings on these days in the world of crypto and in the world in general. Nothing of historical significance happened today, so we'll blow right past that. Why don't you kick us off on the order?
Keep on trucking as we're recording the evening of May 30th. Look, this is not what we were talking about, but it's kind of what we're talking about. Blockchain is getting a little political, Kyle. Let's start with FIT 21, which is the biggest ever U.S. policy win as the U.S. Congress, the House of Representatives, not the full Congress, but half of it, voted to approve the Financial Innovation and Technology for the 21st Century Act, or FIT 21 bill, which seeks to establish a regulatory regime with the CFTC as the leading regulator, marking what I think is the industry's most significant legislative accomplishment, and really the first time that there's been a major crypto market structure bill that has been really gotten a vote, but especially cleared the Chamber of Commerce. Kyle, what do you think? Is this bill or some version of it going to get passed?
Certainly tough to predict, but it certainly has headwinds that it didn't have before. I mean, if you asked me this question 2, 3 weeks ago, I would have said absolutely not. The White House had made its position very clear that it was going to veto these things. It didn't really seem to have a lot of backing in Congress. And then all of a sudden, a few things kind of happened in tandem. One, the staff accounting bulletin 21 was overturned. That's the rule that required banks to carry a corresponding asset to any digital asset that it acted as a custodian for. Meaning, if you had $100 of Bitcoin on your balance sheet, you had to have $100 of another asset, corresponding to that. So that dissuaded banks from being involved in the space. That was one that had been in effect for 2 years. And then the other thing was that the Ethereum ETFs got approved kind of from almost one day to the next. So a lot of stuff going on. And what's important about the Blockchain Integrity Act that you were talking about a minute ago is that this had bipartisan support, which I don't think anybody would have expected. Now, again, without sticking our faces in the political hornet's nest, when you have Republicans and Democrats holding hands and singing kumbaya and passing these things in the House, and Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, has also been on board with this. I mean, there's a lot of progress that we have not seen. I'm not sure where we go from here, but if you could try to predict whether this would pass the House, I mean, Moish, what do you think about it?
Look, as much as I want to say blockchain shouldn't be political, crypto shouldn't be political, I think it has become that. And I think it's a shame that it's become political because crypto, it shouldn't be political, right? This is about bringing entrepreneurship and innovation and jobs to America. This is about exporting the US dollar via stablecoins to the rest of the world. This is about making New York City and the US the leader
Right.
in financial innovation and technology. Like, these are all bipartisan, resoundingly bipartisan issues. It's about equity in getting people across the financial spectrum, across all classes, and getting them out of things like Elizabeth Warren. I read her course book. I learned from her course book about how come the Great Recession, all these big banks were needling down the little person, grinding them into dust. And we need to fight up and stand up for the little people. That's what crypto does. This should be a bipartisan issue. And it's a shame that somehow we lost that thread. It's a shame that there's so many people that were standing in the way of responsible innovation. And I think it's unfortunate that it took the political winds shifting for us to reclaim that ground a little bit. But look, I think that's the reality. I think for whatever reason, I have, in my humble opinion, there are many reasons this became a political football over the past few weeks. But the reality is it did. And we, the industry kind of let the wind hit its sails. in this
It'll be
instance.
really interesting to see what happens, given that it is, I don't know if you know, it is an election year. Newsflash, everybody. It'll be curious to see which side, if they even try to sort of wrangle, control over the narrative about what these bills entail and what goes on. Because certainly these bills, putting aside the bipartisan support that they have, these bills do have a lot of critics. Just for one, the act does seem to put a lot of it wants to establish a regulatory regime with the CFTC as the leading regulator of these assets. And critics of this bill say, the CFTC is not equipped to handle this. They have what 700 employees. I mean, it's not enough. So
Well, yeah, I think that's right, and I think there was really valid criticism about the merits of the bill and the merits of allowing the CFTC to take the lead here. Gabriel Shapiro, who's a pretty popular Twitter commentator in the legal world, come on Block and Order, came out pretty strongly
yeah,
against Fit 21. I think what you just said about it being a political year, uh, an election year, is a pretty good reason why this will not get
right.
passed in the Senate, because the signaling's already happened. People have registered their votes in the House. I think it's kind of done enough until nothing's going to happen until probably
Probably.
2025 at this
But
point.
we take progress, however incremental it may be, and we can't let perfect be the enemy of the
That's
good.
right.
So
A
onward
win
and
is a
upward.
win. The ETFs are on the way. We have some headwind on the Fit 21, and the SAB 121 is going to
Yeah,
be jettisoned. So all positive developments, all tied to politicking, all tied to voters making themselves
that's
feel
it.
heard on
And
these
nothing
issues.
can possibly go wrong from here. Well, next up on the order, Moish, not as politically charged, but Dolce & Gabbana has been in the news. Dolce & Gabbana USA is being sued for delaying the delivery of its NFT project called DGFamily NFTs, which they told customers would grant them access to various digital rewards, physical products, exclusive events, so on and so forth. A plaintiff by the name of Luke Brown, who lost $5,800 on his NFT, filed suit in the SDNY for the late delivery of the products that purportedly caused the loss of value of his assets and so on and so forth. He alleged in the complaint that the NFT came with digital outfits to wear in the metaverse that showed up 20 days behind, and he complained that it was too late and it gave him access to the metaverse, which had relatively few users. Moish, you're a litigator. What do you think of the merits of this guy's claim? Putting aside the whether what he's saying is true or not, do you think this case holds any water whatsoever?
Oh, that's a tough one because it's really facts specific, and I don't know enough about what the contract looked like that he signed, if there was one, when he took delivery of his NFTs. I don't know enough about what he expected and what was sold and what was advertised. And those are all, if it gets that far, those are going to be
Right.
issues in this case. Whether there was a contract, an online contract formed, terms of service, things like that, and what was he sold. So it's really difficult to predict. But from the brand perspective, this is always one of those risks, right? You release an NFT set, the customer, uh, you know, gets their NFT, right? You've done a lot of what you were saying you're going to do, but then you have to deliver things like metaverse assets and, uh, you know, physical products, and there's delays and things take longer than they should and they don't work right. This is all new technology. It's beta. You're working with contractors perhaps that may not be doing what they said they're going to do, or may not be doing it as quickly, or may not be as good as you thought they were when you hired them. So unless you're executing this all in house and you know exactly what you're doing, and you're delivering everything like on time with value to like making every person happy, like this is what could happen, right? So you only hope that a large brand like Dolce and Gabbana had good legal counsel, set this thing up right, and mitigated the risks as much as they could. But the reality is, no matter what you do, it's always possible for someone to file something like this. And so, I think the facts that he alleged here were probably the case in like 70% of
Well, that
NFT
well,
like
that's the thing.
drops.
I was going to ask you. I mean, has this ever happened to you? Surely every NFT you bought has wholly delivered on all of its promises, including value and so on and so forth. Certainly for mine, they are all just, swimming in increased value. So I think this can curiously open the door for a lot of these cases.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's going to open the door. I think a lot of these suits have been filed already. I think this is one in a
Mm.
now series of quite a few of these. Um, but it's really, I think a lot, like some of these should be
Yeah.
actionable. Some of these
It,
are even
well,
criminal, right? We've seen the
sure.
DOJ get involved in rug pulls. I don't think
No.
this is a rug pull. I think they just like we got to the metaverse 20 days late and it wasn't really as good as
Right.
we hoped it would be. Um, it's kind of the allegation, which sucks. And the guy lost $6,000. That's kind of what he
I
signed
feel
up
like
for too.
Dolce and Gabbana, and I'm making an assumption here, but their lawyers would have had the good sense to put in the terms of use that, hey, this is risky, you may lose value, so all these things are out of our control, all that kind of stuff. It's not a rug pull. It's not one of these like invest in us and you're going to make $1 billion. I don't know. Just this seems a little
Right.
wishy-washy to me.
Right. I mean, we're going to get to it later, though, that forming an online contract on the blockchain isn't always so
Spoiler alert.
easy. Even, yeah, it's a spoiler alert. Sorry.
That's for a later topic.
All right, moving on to our next topic, everyone's favorite topic, my mom's favorite topic, Kyle's favorite topic,
Hmm.
MEV, or maximum or extractable value. So, federal prosecutors arrested two brothers who studied at MIT on charges that they stole $25 million of cryptocurrency in about 12 seconds. It's pretty quick. On a time value, like it's past,
Pretty
if
good.
this is a
Pretty good.
heist,
12
that's
seconds. Yeah.
pretty good. So they alleged that they exploited a vulnerability in MEV Boost, which is used to optimize Ethereum validator, block building, and that they tampered with those transactions. So, Kyle, is this what the DOJ should be doing? Investigating fraudulent MEV blocks and front running by alleged bad actors here.
Well, if what the DOJ is saying is true, then they absolutely should be saying that. And I realize that circular logic and self-fulfilling sort of argument, but it's clear, at least from what they're asserting, that these two brothers, Anton Pereira Bueno and his brother James Pereira Bueno, the Bueno brothers, it seems that the way they targeted these validators, finding the specific ones, they used lure transactions, and they were trying to find the ones who would really optimize the MEV boost, for the highest level transactions because that's how they get paid. They found the weak links in the chain and they exploited it. According to the DOJ. I mean, to me, you compare this to the Mango situation from a couple of weeks ago with Avi Eisenberg that we talked about, where I felt that he just kind of exploited a loophole and didn't quite do anything as wrong as the DOJ was saying. But these two guys, again, if what they're saying is true, it looked like they were purposefully doing it, and all of the things that they did around these transactions, moving, moving the money right out of their account, Googling wire fraud and money laundering and extradition laws. I mean, look, we don't give legal advice here on Block and Order, but if you are going to commit a crime, do not Google how to dissolve a body. Does the state have the death penalty? Just don't do that. Okay, that's the end of my spiel for that. But I mean, you seem to be of the other opinion that these guys just kind of exploited a loophole. I don't know. It just seems like these guys knew what they were doing.
Look, I agree that the alleged after the fact behavior, including like setting up shell companies and moving the money through multiple routes and the online searches, like those don't look good. Let's agree to agree and set those aside. I think there's a very slippery slope about analyzing the way people are
Mm-hmm.
building blocks and the way they're structuring transactions and saying this is a transaction that we think was a tamper transaction, was a lure transaction, and labeling these things and saying, well, there's really this criminal motive versus someone saying, there's mispriced assets. I see an arbitrage. I'm executing a transaction within a block, 12 seconds, and and flipping that, right? So you're right, though. I think if you go back to Avi Eisenberg's case and you say, well, that was a different kind of exploit, that's criminal. To me, it feels very, very slippery slope that it's hard to dive into these transactions. And now, we're analyzing a year later what happened in like a 12-second block and deciding whether or not it feels a
I
little
get it.
absurd to me.
Was 12 Seconds the Luke Perry movie about like bucking bronco racing? I'm not making that up. That was like a real thing, right?
You
All right.
lost me.
Well,
I have like no idea. I know Luke Perry, but
we're
you
going to
lost
pull
me on
that
the
up in
rest of
the
the
edit. We're going to
sentence.
show a flash from the movie. That's a real thing. All
Okay, now I have
right,
some
good.
homework.
As do all our viewers. Well, moving right along, Coinbase, as everybody knows, has been in the news and has been under fire from the SEC for quite some time. Supreme Court recently unanimously ruled against Coinbase, not in a case directly related to its business, but in a case that stemmed from a Dogecoin sweepstakes competition in 2021 involving a dispute over conflicting clauses in two separate contracts, now leaving them with a mixed record. With respect to these, the one contract said that any disputes had to go through arbitration, and the arbitrator would decide whether the case was going to be arbitratable. And the other contract said that any dispute would have to go to courts in California. So, just word to the wise out there, make sure you do your homework and actually read these things. So Coinbase users filed a class action suit in the United States District Court in the Northern District of California, alleging that the sweepstakes violated California laws, and Coinbase moved to compel arbitration based on this one provision. And the court held, and subsequently the Ninth Circuit affirmed, that the official rules forum selection clause controlled the dispute and the case was not subject to arbitration. Moish, again, you're a litigator, you're smart. What do you think about all this?
Like I previewed it before. Uh, this sounds like a bit of a fuck up, right? There were two contracts. One contract said arbitration. That was the Coinbase user agreement, which everyone should be familiar with if they use Coinbase. And there was another contract that said district courts prevail. And one of the arbitration agreements going to say no class actions. You can't really sue us. You have to go to arbitration, which is for an individual person is can be a bit punitive. Perhaps it depends on the circumstances. But then if you want to file class action, you have to go in district court, and you can't do that in arbitration. And this sweepstakes agreement said that was what you could do, or it didn't prevent that. So they sued under that agreement. And I think why am I discussing this case? This is about Coinbase, but it's really not about Coin. It's not really a crypto issue, is it? I think it is because it shows how important these contract formation issues are to basically every blockchain business. If this could happen to Coinbase, which has an army of really amazing lawyers working on the stuff, and they spend a lot of time pushing cases into arbitration and making sure they stay there, then it can happen to you, right? So I think there's a lot of takeaways here about you get your first contract right, but then how do you keep everything consistent down the road? How do you run your organization in an efficient way and make sure that all of your contracts from top to bottom in all the different ways, all of your users can interact with your service, are structured in a way which are consistent and which is going to ultimately minimize risk for your organization. It's a really tough problem, and you have to go to the Supreme Court here to solve it and find out you can have to go to litigate a class action in district court.
Heaven forbid you ever have to do that. But just as kind of a PSA to everybody listening and watching us out there, when you go onto a website, whether it's Coinbase or anything, and you click the I agree to the terms and conditions, that's a binding agreement. And that's what these things are talking about. And it's not insignificant. And we've seen a lot of litigation, especially over the past couple of years with all of these different kind of platforms and projects emerging, that people just errantly click. I'm guilty. Moish, we're lawyers. I do the same thing. I don't read that all the time.
All the time.
And everybody should watch the South Park episode where Kyle agreed to the Apple terms of service and unknowingly agreed to be in the middle of a human centipede. We should pull that graphic up. I mean, that's we joke, but that is very real. That is absolutely what happened. So everybody needs to be aware. 100%. PSA, again, we don't give legal advice, but legal advice. Read those things, even though you're not going to, and we're not going to either.
But also, like, it's only boilerplate until it matters, and then all of a sudden you need it, and you don't have
contracts are your insurance policy. Nobody reads them until something goes wrong, and when they go wrong, the teeth come out. So be careful out there, everybody.
All right, Kyle, moving on to our next topic. Uniswap has responded to the Wells notice they received from the SEC. So if you remember last month, Uniswap publicized that they had received a Wells notice from the SEC and that they were going to challenge it, and they were going to challenge it publicly, which is, why they had gone so public about it, right? And in this past week, we received their public response to that Wells notice, where they argued that the SEC should effectively drop their case, that they didn't have the resources to fight basically against Uniswap, which is kind of funny, and that their legal theories are weak and wrong. So, Kyle, what do you think? Is the SEC going to take Uniswap's response under advisement and drop their
Absolutely.
case?
Mea culpa. We're sorry, Uniswap. We're dropping the case. You're totally right. What a sound legal basis you have for your response. No, they're probably not going to do that. But I said in our last episode that I loved that Uniswap was doing this, that they were going to take it to the streets and get their hands dirty and roll up their sleeves. And I like that they're being so public in their response. You know, people don't have the financial wherewithal or the stomach to go up against a regulatory body as powerful as the SEC, and certainly one as influential, and especially one with the track record the SEC has in the past couple of years. But Uniswap's response, I think, is very sound, and they're using the SEC's own guidance against them. And I think that's the key. And not, obviously, the SEC is not just going to back down, because that would basically kneecap any actions that they try to take going forward. But Uniswap makes some very salient points. And just to go over it a little bit, you know, the Securities Act says, you know, what the categories of securities are: stocks, bonds, and of course, investment contracts, which are governed by the Howey test, which I'm not going to recite right now. I'm going to assume that everybody knows what it is. But if you remember in the Ripple case, it was held that the tokens themselves are not in and of themselves investment contracts. Therefore, they fail the Howey test. Well, that's what the SEC is saying Uniswap did here, that the tokens by themselves are investment contracts. And we know that's false. And what Uniswap is saying, that if the transactions in digital tokens are automatically treated as investment contracts, regardless of how, when, or why they're sold, then basically anything that anybody buys is automatically a security. I remember 3 years ago when we first, got together at the firm, which, can you believe that tomorrow is my 3-year anniversary at the firm, putting that aside. Thank you.
Congratulations,
Thank
and
you.
that's wild.
You asked me, based on this analysis, if I go buy a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle from the store, expecting that it's going to appreciate in value, that makes it a security. And Uniswap is saying that is ridiculous. Baseball cards are not securities, and we know that for a fact that they're not. The sale of luxury limited edition goods, where people spend heavily on marketing and control who purchases which items, these are Uniswap's words. Those things are not securities. So I'm of the view that Uniswap's response is very sound, it's very reasoned, and I'm really curious to see how the SEC I mean, I know they're going to respond, but I'm really curious to see what reasoning they're going to have going forward in response to this very public flogging, I think, that they're undergoing.
Yeah, I mean, well said, and I agree. The Wells notice response was incredibly well drafted, um, and presents some really great arguments, and I think also relies on a lot of these more recent
Yeah.
decisions over, from the XRP decision on forward in the past year. Now we have a bit of body of law to say, well, here's how the judge are actually analyzing these in the past 12 months, effectively, and here's why you're wrong. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to see that the SEC is probably not going to take that under advisement, probably going to file the case. And we were right also, right? We hadn't seen the Wells notice in our last episode itself. I still think the Wells notice itself has not been published, but we were correct in presuming that the protocol itself, as being framed as a broker, and the Uni token being framed as a security, were the two bases that the SEC was coming after. And it seems like from the response, that's correct. And those are the two issues that Uniswap is now defending against, and might have to continue defending against in a litigation setting. So we'll see how this goes.
Suck it, SEC.
All right. So for our next segment, we are going to try something new, Kyle, aren't we?
Let's do it.
All right. This is our lightning round. So Kyle, the first one, I think, has your name written all over it.
Well, ChatGPT the voice sounded a little bit like Scarlett Johansson, and she didn't sue them, but she questioned it. And apparently, ChatGPT is now no longer going to be using Scarlett Johansson's voice. Although Sam Altman did tweet the word "her" following the company's event, and if everybody saw that movie, it's a pretty great movie. But in any event, so Moish,
it is a pretty great movie. I think it deserves a rewatch.
Now it does.
Look, name and likeness law does not require that you use someone's literal voice. If you use an imitation, if you make a reference to, and you get some commercial advantage from that. There is state level privacy laws that protect against that, and I think there's a Bette Midler case
Yeah,
going back
that's
like
right.
probably 50 years in very like circumstances. So it should be interesting to see if this one actually
It
ends up
sounded a
being
little like
litigated
her. Well, I think this
and
though. Well, who would be a good voice for right off the top of your head? Who would be a great voice? Just
for
yeah, I got
ChatGPT.
one.
Oh God, probably like Michelle
Oh,
Obama.
I was
I
going to
don't
say
know. What do you
Bobcat
think?
Goldthwait, but your answer was legitimate, and so
Like
so
Tom
oh,
Waits, Bob Dylan.
there
I
you
don't know. You
go.
got to go like the.
Yeah. Well,
I'm sorry. Move it!
next up, key opinion leaders, or KOL rounds, are a popular way for founders to market their projects without going out of pocket. As we talked about on Block and Order, key influencers who get paid exorbitant sums to market crypto assets and different protocols and platforms have been sued left and right. So now the new thing is, well, we're not going to pay you, but instead we're going to let you buy our assets at a favorable valuation so you can kind of cash out in the early, kind of a little bit of a legal end around. I don't know. I think it's kind of an interesting way. Be curious to see if these people still get sued.
All right, next lightning round. The SEC has rejected Coinbase's call for new regulations. So if you remember, Coinbase has been basically asking nicely and maybe even begging a little bit to say, please just give us a little regulation that we can deal with.
God.
And the SEC has said, no, it's unreasonable to call the existing regulation unworkable and so forth. So is there any regulatory pathway here to the SEC, like delivering new regulation while this Fit 21 congressional kind of bill
Well,
makes its way
maybe when
through?
that legislation gets passed, I mean, God willing, sometime in the next year or two. But the SEC's response is pretty telling. It just says the fact that the commission has brought crypto asset security related enforcement actions does not require the commission to grant a rulemaking petition. To the contrary, in authorizing these enforcement actions, the commission necessarily determined that the agency could assert claims under existing law. There you have it, folks.
Nothing's going
God.
to change, Kyle, without a it's a
Ugh,
political
God, I
football.
hate
Here we
them
go
so
again.
much. Money laundering trial against Binance head Tigran Gambaryan was postponed until June 20th. Apparently, he has malaria, is seriously ill, and needs medical attention. Moish, what do you think about what's going on with this guy?
This whole case is a complete travesty. I can't believe Tigran, who was a federal government employee at the IRS for over 10 years, he was one of the government's top blockchain investigators. This guy's effectively a hero for our nation in investigating some of the earliest blockchain crime. And now he's basically held in prison pending trial, getting malaria over the actions of Binance that really all they're doing is providing a way for Nigerian citizens to get their money out of a failing currency.
Right.
This whole thing is crazy. And the fact that nobody's talking about this guy being held hostage in Nigeria is insane.
The U.S. response has been pretty limp. I'm not going to lie. There should be a little bit more of an uproar. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Last topic is to get on the bell. Craig Stephen Wright is not Satoshi.
Well, not to be confused with Stephen Wright, the deadpan comedian, but Craig Stephen Wright.
Craig
Wright.
Wright.
Yeah.
I don't know. The Stephen
seems kind of thrown in there.
Superfluous.
I don't know. The lady doth protest too much. Methinks. I mean, this guy has sort of spent a small fortune trying to prove that he is Satoshi between lawsuits and filing, injunctions against people who were claiming that he wasn't, and turns out he's not. So I guess you lose all your money then.
Turns out he's not. And if he was, he wouldn't need to spend a small fortune to prove
it would just be
have
right. A fool and his money are soon parted, I suppose. There you have it. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Block and Order. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. If there's a topic you would like us to cover, please drop a comment down below. We do take those very seriously. Please note the show is meant for information and entertainment purposes only. This is not legal advice. Please hire your own representative if you're going to take the plunge. Also remember, some of the assets that we discuss on the show may be owned by Moish, myself, or some of the other makers of the show. Our discussion of these assets is in no way, shape, or form meant to promote these assets in any way, so please take anything we say with a grain of salt. Special thanks to producer Abby, our OG producer. Without her, the show would not be possible. So on behalf of Moish Peltz, I'm Kyle Lawrence. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.